Hello. Today I'd like to talk about connection and the connection that organisms have with their environment. Today we're going to talk about physics, and more intensely we'll talk about quantum physics and what quantum physics has shown us. Quantum physics is more of a newer science. It's been around for quite some time, I believe about 70 years now. So basically what the difference between this and our old physics is called Newtonian physics, and it's based on a macro level. It's based on observing objects like tennis balls and baseballs and planets and things that we can physically see with our eyes. And when we talk about quantum physics, we talk about things like electrons, protons, neutrons, all the building blocks that make up reality. So all of the tiny microscopic things that we see. And what we realized when we started to investigate quantum physics is that on a micro level, particles and the whole world in reality acts completely different than it does in the macro level in Newtonian physics. Like take things like gravity doesn't even exist. And there's one of my favorite experiments, and this has basically changed reality for me, is it's called the double slit experiment. So basically what that showed us is it would take an electron and see how it would act when it was unobserved. And when it was unobserved, it would act like a wave. And when an electron acts like a wave, there is no true particle there. There's nothing really there. There's just merely the possibility of a particle. And one of the best, in a sense, ways to think of it as there's Schrodinger's cat. It's one of the most famous types of mind experiments to think of this. So if you were to take, say, a cat and you put it in a box, and then you put a particle of radiation that had a 50% chance of decaying, and if this particle decayed, what it would do is it would release cyanide into the cat's box and kill the cat. So what they basically are saying with quantum physics, that until you actually open that box after you've performed that experience, every possibility exists. The cat is both dead and alive. So that's what I mean when I say a wave, that every possibility exists. And what we find actually is when we observe these electrons and these protons, that's when they become a solid particle. They become a particle that you see. And when I say a solid particle, that's not even accurate, because 99.9% of those solid particles is actually just space in between. It's kind of like, imagine if you had some bouncy balls bouncing in a giant room, and they just kind of moved all together, and there's huge space in between them. Or you could maybe look at, for example, when you see a flock of birds flying together, they almost look as if they move as one bird, but there's that space in between. And that's kind of how our electrons interact. There's always that empty space there, but it's kind of getting a little bit off topic here. But so yeah, basically what we found is when we weren't observing reality, it acted like a wave. It acted like a possibility. And when we did observe it, that's when it became a particle. It became a hard, solid particle. So what this basically has showed us is there's a relationship between our subconscious, and when I say subconscious, I mean the part of your mind that you're not in control of. So for example, it'd be like pumping your heart and your immune system. It's not like you can really tell your heart to pump any faster. Sure, you can get all worked up and stuff, but it's a subconscious action. It's something you're not in control of. And they say about 99 to 95% of what you do is subconscious. And what your conscious mind is what you have control of, so your thinking mind. It's very slow, and it can't really handle the type of information and the amount of information. The subconscious actually handles 1,000,000 times the information as the conscious mind, but the conscious mind's our thinking mind, so it gives us that little edge. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is there's a relationship between our subconscious and our environment that actually creates the environment. So what people, and a great show to watch about this is The Secret, and it basically shows people who use their conscious mind, and what they'll do is they'll train their subconscious, and the way you train your subconscious is routine. you constantly show it what you want, and it's kind of like a supercomputer. If you keep asking it for something, you keep asking it, you keep asking it, it'll give you what you want. The problem is most people are victims, and they victimize themselves. So when you victimize yourself, your subconscious will give you more situations in the future that you can victimize yourself. So whatever thought pattern you have is going to react with that subconscious, and that's going to create the environment around you. So in a sense, if you want to go after something, you want to go after your dream, the most important thing you can do is you put that in your mind. You go after that, you put action towards that, and when your subconscious sees that, it will adapt you. It will adapt the environment to help you, and it will be with you. If you send signals to your subconscious that, why does this always happen to me, life's so unfair, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have unfair life, and that's the message you're sending. So another thing I want to talk about in regards to quantum physics is another experiment they came up with. It's called quantum entanglement. So what they did was they would take two electrons that were connected, and they would move them. They could move one to one side of the universe, the other to the other side of the universe, and they kind of react in the same sense that when you observe one, it would change from a wave to a particle. But what they found that was very interesting is by observing one of these particles, say it was on the other side of the universe, the other would instantly act as if it was observed. So they kind of cancel each other out. So if you looked at the one that was on the other side of the universe and it was spinning to the left, then the other one on the other side of the universe would instantly start spinning to the right to equalize it out. And there was no traveling the speed of light. This was instant. And it just kind of shows us the connection we have with one another, that we're constantly connected. And you look at Einstein's theory of relativity, and he starts to talk about things like how velocity changes space and time. So we talk about space and time as if it's a constant, as if it's unchangeable. 1 second's 1 second, but that's not true at all. For example, if you were say you traveled in a spaceship, and you traveled 0.8 the speed of light, and you went to a planet that was 15 light years away, or we'll say 7.5 light years away. So it would take you 15 light years of your time to get back to this planet. 7.5 there, 7.5 back. Well, the funny part is when you actually do the math on this, and this is the math that we actually use for satellites that are traveling around the Earth, because they're moving at a different velocity, so we actually have to calculate time differently on those. So actually what happens is, because you're traveling faster, actually space, not only time would change for you, but space actually shrinks. So you'll actually travel through less space. So if someone, for example, had a ruler on Earth, it would be 1 meter long. But if you had that same ruler on that spaceship that was traveling 0.8 the speed of light, it would only be 80 centimeters long. So there's a difference there. It's absolutely amazing. And so we're getting back to this. So we had taken this 15-year trip, and by the time we get back to Earth, 25 years would have went by on Earth's time. So you actually moved in the future 10 years based on the velocity that you're traveling. So you look at Mars, you look at all of these other planets, all of these other galaxies, they're actually, time is moving different to them, and so is space, all of those things. You could spend, for example, if you were on a planet that was moving 0.999 the speed of light, you could spend 1 hour there, and it could equal 50 years on Earth. And this is actually calculated. Einstein has equations for this. It's absolutely amazing. So I just wanted to kind of show you that the reality that we kind of think of isn't actually even true, even accurate. It's not what physicists believe. It's just the way our brains have been programmed. Our brains were never truly programmed to look at the micro level. Our eyes don't see electrons until we get a microscope on them. So that really wasn't an aspect. So what we do is we go based on our senses and what feels to us, and the micro level has always been hidden from us. So it almost just gets thrown to the back burner, and we feel as if we know the physics of reality, but that's not true at all. And another thing I want to basically say in regards to this is, look at the way you treat other people. Look at the way you treat other things. And when you start putting out anger and you start putting out hatred into this world, that's what you're going to receive back. So remember to put out love, and remember to enjoy everyone and have a fun, exciting time enjoying this life. This is your life, and you can do whatever you want with it. But I promise you, the more love you put out in your life, the more love you'll get back.